Hello everyone and welcome back. In this video we will talk about how to determine a sample size when we are planning any study. Now if we want to attain a certain margin of error with some level of confidence, then we can rearrange the formula for the margin of error to solve for the sample size n. So with some algebra, we end up with this equation for the sample size, which is the critical value over the margin of error squared times p hat times 1 minus p hat. Now this formula requires p hat to be known or estimated from a prior study. However, if we don't know what p hat is, then we can choose the value such that p hat times 1 minus p hat is the largest, which will happen if p hat equals 0.5. And whenever we calculate sample sizes, we should always round up to the nearest integer to ensure the level of confidence that we want to achieve. So let's suppose the TV executive would like to find a 95% confidence interval estimate to within 0.03 for the proportion of all households that watch Stranger Things regularly. So how large of a sample do we need? So what we need to determine the sample size is the critical value. And since we want a 95% confidence level, this tells us that our critical value, Z star, is 1.96. Now we want the confidence interval estimate to be within 0.03. And so this tells us that the margin of error is equal to 0.03. And the last thing that we need is p hat. And since we're not given p hat, we should choose p hat to be 0.5. And choosing 0.5 for p hat will give us a conservative estimate, meaning that it will likely overestimate how large of a sample that we need. So now we can find the sample size. So n is going to be the critical value over the margin of error squared times p hat times 1 minus p hat. So we have 1.96 over 0.03 squared times 0.5 times 1 minus 0.5. And this will be approximately 1067.1 repeating. And we will always round our sample size up to the nearest integer. And so our sample size that we need is 1068. And so we should sample at least 1068 households. So now let's suppose that we have a prior estimate of 0.85 for p hat. How large of a sample do we need in this case? So we still want to achieve a 95% confidence level. So the critical value is 1.96 and our margin of error is 0.03. So now we can calculate the sample size for this case. So we have 1.96 divided by 0.03 squared times 0.85 times 1 minus 0.85. And this will be approximately 544 0.226 repeating. Now we can't sample 0.226 repeating of a household, so we're going to round up to the nearest integer, which is 545. And so we should sample at least 545 households. And notice that this estimate is a bit smaller than our conservative estimate from Part A. So that concludes our lesson for this video. In the next video, we will talk about the other method I've mentioned at the start of this chapter for making inferences, which is hypothesis testing. And I'll see you then.